So we're having the discussion in Shona or English?
We mix.
Yeah, so
what brought how did you get to Cape Town? What brought you here?
I came actually in Cape Town initially in 2008 at the height of the political crisis. So me and Wallen, we took the bus. We didn't know anyone in Cape Town. We just thought maybe there wasn't a community of artists that we can join or see what lies beyond the borders. We went on the bus, we went to Johannesburg, and Johannesburg was like kind of different because we were in the city center where we couldn't find any form of artist community. And then I think a week later we took the train and came out to Cape Town. I think the first time we went into the city and we found all this creativity and the gallery spaces, was say, okay, this is our space. And decided to base our careers here. Yeah.
And then you managed to stay here? I mean, was it a problem with your kind of paperwork, or how did you manage to decide to live here?
Yeah, it was quite difficult. Obviously, you're coming into a new city, coming from a background but you didn't know anyone in South Africa, especially in the art community. So we came obviously on a visitor's visa, which we overstayed because we were looking for opportunities. And paperwork was always difficult to get. Obviously, you're an artist and you're trying to balance between finding a space to work, a space to live, to feed yourself. It was all different factors that we had to settle in. We were quite young, I think, when we came, we were about 23 years old. It was 10 years ago. So Wallen, you were asking, Michele.
Yeah, I was asking, did you have any problems coming? How did you come here?
How did you end up here?
Yes.
I was quite lucky because I was actually, through fate, I was actually born in South Africa. Oh. So my family, my mother organized a South African ID, but I never grew up here. So I just came here. I was born here, but then we moved back to Zim, and I grew up in Zim. And then when I was 18, 19, I came back to study here, and it was quite interesting because I had this ID from when I was born, which was in 1977, which was then still obviously, apartheid, and I came back post-apartheid, and then went to Home Affairs with this strange ID book, and they were like, "What is this? Who are you?" But then luckily I was obviously on the records, and then I managed to get my South African citizenship. So I have dual nationalities, citizenship, Zimbabwe. But then it got complicated because then obviously during the political crisis in Zim, they started questioning dual citizenship, and so I've kind of kept it all a little bit. I have to kind of keep everything. I had to keep everything a little bit kind of undercover. And
so after you were born here, you went to Zim and got another.
Yeah, so I got a Zim ID. I got a Zim ID as well. Yeah.
Nice.
So then I grew up in Zim, but then I studied here, and then moved back to Zim for a while, and then between the two places.
Okay, so where is it in Zimbabwe?
Originally, my family from Bulawayo, and then but I grew up in Harare. Yeah.
But how do you, the time you were young, like how do you experiment in were you involved in the art scenario, like?
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know if it's just I don't know. I always think that Zimbabweans are generally quite sort of aware of visual arts and culture. I think probably from the way that the craft industry or the kind of the craft making in Zimbabwe is such a big thing. You're exposed. I think anyone growing up in Zimbabwe is exposed to sculpture and things. even if it's just on the side of the road.
Yes.
And I mean, we've got a sculpture on our national flag. I don't think any other country in the world has that. So I was exposed to it, and then National Gallery and Delta Gallery was always a sort of big part of like my experience of growing up there, doing art at school as well.
Which school did you go to?
Prince Edward.
So you worked at Gallery Delta as well?
Yeah. I used to go there. Helen used to do the Saturday morning
Yeah,
classes.
same. I also used to go to the.
I think that Richard, you also there.
I
Yeah.
was also there. Yeah.
No, it was amazing. She created such a great space for young artists to be able to go and work there. Yeah.
Giving them a chance also, I think, to experience, to learn, and then also to experience how the work in the gallery as well. Because at the gallery, Saturday morning, also at the back,
Yeah.
in the courtyard. So
Yeah.
it was,
It was almost like an informal art school, really,
Indeed.
for Harare.
I mean, I even did my own A-levels there with Helen.
Yeah.
Me too. Me too. And in Wallen, maybe you can also share your experiences. Your perspective.
What was I saying?
So for you, your
I didn't say
experience.
anything. Yeah, I've always had a passion for art, and I studied in my secondary school at Zengeza One High, where he went to school to do his secondary also. So there was a club, like an art club, which did not have an experienced art tutor, and
The art club was in the school. It
was like the lady was just teaching us some, I don't know, smudging, whatnot. I think she did her studies on YouTube or something.
No, you should respect.
I don't know what she was doing. He was already going to Delta Gallery. And one day he brought a strange drawing. He doesn't know about this. He brought a drawing like, it was a drapery, but I was like, what is this? I didn't know, but I just loved to draw, to copy, everyone loved to draw cartoons, like musician, album, Yeah, but then, after that, then I went to BAT. When did we come? When did we plan to come?
Oh, in 2008, at the height
2008.
of the
September.
the crisis. I think it was September, yeah.
September.
But
Yeah.
we were already done with college and what.
You were already done, yeah. You were already done at that time. So,
Yeah, we just decided to come, and we thought, when we were in Joburg, we thought like, let's go far, where people don't normally go. And we thought we were a few Zimbabweans here, but we're very surprised to hear people in front of us, and they were speaking Shona.
Yeah.
I was like, we thought we were the only ones here. So yeah. Then
It's amazing how much Shona. I mean, I'd say 80% of conversation I hear in an Uber or in restaurants is Shona these days.
Yeah.
We are all over. Yeah, we are all over. We invade the space. Yeah.
Yeah, and talking of resilience, I think that period that I went to college with him, I was staying from Chitumbiza, and the transport everything was literally tough. There was no fuel, no food. So we could go once per week at school to just go and leave what we were doing during the course of the week and get more material like papers and poster paying. So yeah, because you could go at the bus stop 6 a.m., around 6 a.m., and you could get to school around 1 p.m. because you're in the queue with like bigger people
working class.
than you, working class. Yes, they are pushing you around, you're tiny, you're going to school. So you get transport later during the day, then it was very tough. And sometimes, you could walk for longer distances just to get to school. So I think that toughness, it was brewing inside, just for us to continue making work. Yeah. Tega.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
yes.
Because I think
think,
Tapato, you came a little bit
Yeah.
earlier than us.
yeah.
You came.
I
How
think
did you come?
for me, after, to make the long story short, but when I was young, I was so inspired because all the artists, famous artists, they were where I was staying in the streets, like around. They were like working at the BAT workshop. So me, I was born in Mbare, and so when we play in the street, we know the people. We stand on the wire to see the people carving, painting. So there was a guy who was studying there at the BET, John Gusinho. So for John Gusinho, after he graduated BET, he started. He was having this love for art. So when he see us like sketching in the streets, he always invite us to come to his studio. So that's how I say, hey. And he was telling me I was good at sketching. So I thought to myself, hey, this is it, man. Let me stick to this guy. So after school, I used to go by his house. And then when I finished graduate, the BAT, there was nothing in Zimbabwe. Things were getting tough. We were living with.
When you say BAT, you must say BAT Visual Arts School. Because
Yeah.
you say BAT.
But they know, man. It's yeah.
There's such a strong tradition of artists, sort of once they and Moffat, that they've now opened up their studios and are training younger artists as well.
Yeah.
But it's a double-edged sword, because a lot of times you find that those young artists then kind of are working in a very similar way to the more established artists.
I think nowadays they are coming that because there's no more, Delta is no longer that strong. Because when we grow up, when we like, maybe the big artist is trending, so a lot of young artists, they want to paint like him. Helen always top us. So now Delta, a lot of people, they're no longer going to Delta. No, maybe that's why that trend is getting growing now. There's more people want to paint like this guy. There's more people doing this. Because when remember when Tega went to Helen, she always said, no, I don't want to see this in front of people. This is this.
Rubbish.
Yeah, this is rubbish. Don't bring this to my place. So when you go back home, you find yourself, say, okay. And she always motivates us. Like, I think Delta for us is home, man. I remember when I go to Harkins and they were like giving us money, like go and do something, buy material and all. Yeah.
And you retain it. Eh?
Yeah, you return it, but you see, when we come
it's
here,
like an advance.
when we come here, there was not that love. Like, remember at Delta, like, when you take 2 weeks or 3 weeks, Helen used to ask you, do you have paint? What do you want? Do you have money to go back home? So when we come here, it was so tough, like, there was not that love. When we come here, it's strictly business. You bring the work, we sell the work. If you want the work, I think my reason to come here was 2010, the World Cup. At that age, I was going to make it, so there was going to be a lot of people. Then you pack my bags. I pack my bag, I come here. I go to Long Street, there was this gallery called the Video Gallery.
Mm-hmm.
So I did have an appointment with this gallery. I'm standing there, it's raining. There's no rain at home. It's raining, and I must meet this guy, you see. I'm waiting, it's 9 o'clock. I see these 2 guys walking in the streets, just imagine. Like, I didn't believe it. And then they saw me, we started laughing, they asked me, what are you doing here? I asked them also, what are you doing here? Then I told them about the meeting, then we wait also, they get in, The guy ended up showing both of our work.
All of our works, yeah.
Yeah.
We had we consigned.
Was that AVA?
No, it was a
Video gallery.
video
Long
gallery.
Street.
It was in Long Street. It's
I would
call it a commercial. It was kind of like a vanity gallery because it had furniture and a design aspect, and then it had art on the walls. It was in Long Street, and I think it was the first gallery that kind of accepted our work, because everywhere we went, because we were new artists, young, and there was always that rejection. which obviously we were quite not used to. Anyway, it's coming from Zimbabwe, as Adolf is saying, where we always have that acceptance from Helen and Gallery Delta, and then they'll give you some sort of advice as well if they didn't like the work. But this was just like, no. So Vio Gallery then took our work with assignment, Wallen's well, and Tafanta's work. And I think for me, after a few months, they sold a small little painting of mine at that time for 600 Rand. So that was a little bit of so that was a little bit of confidence to say, wow, this is my first international sale, South African sale. And that maybe was a turning point for me to decide to say, I'll establish my career here. The time when we came, it was our first time going into the city as well, me and Wallen, and we met this guy. And it was such a wonderful encounter.
And difficult.
And difficult. And then we started sort of like walking the streets of Cape Town looking for galleries, the three of us with our little paintings rolled up or
in the paper, in the plastic.
In the plastic. Going to galleries and always getting the rejection. But I think we persisted. And we persisted until, I think then we found...
I think also we did get help from the artists who come before us.
Indeed.
Yeah, so they were showing us some direction also. We end up doing, you guys were first one to do creative blocks by SPE.
Yeah, and then so then the creative block project was kind of bread and butter then.
And then Wallen ended up joining the Good of Art Studios. Still remember?
Yeah. But you were there also.
No, you were the first one. I come after you.
Okay. But back then the drive was more on survival, and we're being inspired by the people who studied art before us, the Kambuzis. They were selling at Gallery Delta. So we couldn't thought of getting or going to work because we know we could make art. So we just came with that end. So the drive was, we need to survive, we need money. Back then, it's different now. And I'm curious about you two. What kept you going? I think your experience is different from ours, how we came here.
I mean, Michele and I, we were lucky enough to study art here at Michaelis. So that was a bit of a privileged situation. After I finished Michaelis, I didn't have a visa to stay here. So I went overseas and worked for a few years, but wanted to get back into the art game. And then I actually got a visa to become a permanent resident here through this girlfriend I had at the time, Masha Rodzinski, who ironically got her citizenship here as a refugee from Russia. And I did odd jobs, like I ended up working, assisting photographers and stuff, and then working at the Brett Kibble Art Awards, which was quite a education for me, seeing art from all over South Africa being judged, seeing it behind the curtains, and that really inspired me to start making work again. And I was fortunate enough to be able to go back to Zim in 2006, where I spent 6 months just making work and not having to worry about a job or rent. And that became the body or the basis of my first exhibition that I had here. And I was lucky because my parents were actually attacked in their home just by these thugs, and they left Zimbabwe shortly afterwards. So if I hadn't had that window of opportunity, I probably wouldn't be making art now. But was able to, that first show was quite successful, luckily, and I was able to just keep the momentum going. I was still assisting photographers and doing other things to pay the rent. But I think maybe around 2010 is when I had stopped assisting and I was just full-time being an artist.
When was that first show?
2006. So yeah, actually I was in Zim 2005, and then 2006 was my first show at Ferreira, which doesn't exist anymore.
Oh, okay.
So at that time you had to pay the rent on the gallery and pay for the wine, and it was a whole different system. Yeah, I mean, he used to, so he couldn't lose at all. I mean, you took all the risk. But yeah, I was lucky to have that show then.
We managed to navigate the so complex South African art world.
Well, I mean, I think more and more I'm starting to realize that, it's not a constant. I think I mean, even if we start talking about where we've come from and the journeys that we've taken, I think, you keep thinking, well, you're going to reach a point where suddenly it's just going to be very simple, or you'll make work and you'll give it to someone and they sell it. But I think you just afterwards you realize that it's a journey, and you constantly, the environment's constantly shifting, and you have to keep adjusting. But I think it's probably also a positive thing, because I think then you're constantly sort of questioning your practice and how you work, and the reasons for why you're working. And I think that even in the current situation, it's just I think in some ways artists are quite fortunate, because we're always sort of like on shifting sands, I guess. Yeah. I don't know if that's the same for anyone else.
No, it's the same for me as well.
Yeah, I think it's a constant negotiation with.
Negotiating. Yeah, it's funny because I think in the beginning your knowledge is also exponential, because in the beginning you're relying on people who then start taking advantage of you, but you don't realize you kind of trust this whole thing around trust, right? You're thinking, these people have your back, and then you realize they don't. But I guess it all just makes you more aware of how things work. Yeah.
But I used to think that I'd reach this point where I'd be like sorted, I'd have money in the bank and everything, but it's not like that. 1 month it might be good, but then
I think there's that now realization that being a creative person or an artist, it's actual work. Some people have that notion that we just get inspired and get into the studio and just bang out the work and come out. But I think it's much more. Then you have to navigate the world, the art world, and then you also your own practice in your studio, and then your life as well, and how all those three things interact for you to persist and continue working. It's quite a challenge.
Yeah. And I think I'm also starting to realize you have to appreciate the times. Like sometimes you'll just be doing something very basic or administrative, other times you're focusing on your personal life, and then other times you have an opportunity to maybe be on a residency or to maybe have enough money in the bank to be able to just be in your studio for a month and be able to work. And you kind of start to appreciate the moments that you have to do all these different things.
Indeed.
Yeah. Because you kind of need all of them, I think.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and maybe talking about artHARARE as well, you can put it in there.
Yeah, what was the seed of the idea for that?
So the seed was kind of, I had the opportunity in last year, in 2019, to travel to Europe and America and attend most of the art fairs in the city. And it was quite exciting that in most of the art fairs I attended, there was a Zimbabwean artist, from Freeze to 154 in London to Freeze London even, and Paris as well. So for me it was like, this is exciting, we're quite happy, but I thought, why wouldn't we have such a similar event at home? And I saw how the art fair is going to like bring the whole community of artists and those who are interested in art and culture, they all came together. And yeah, it was such a big thing for the city, like, because I was on a residence in Paris as well, and how that city, the art and culture sort of like ingrained in the city and the people, and how artists are they are actually respected. When you say I'm an artist, then you sort of like get some respect and attention from people in the city. And I thought we should have something similar like this in our country. we are successful in our individual capacities, why don't we at one point make a community and as peers just have something in place? And with what was happening this year with the destruction in the normal art world, and then we saw there was a huge focus on the online space, and well, me and my other colleague thought it might be a very good opportunity for us to start something, because with the online space we are all scattered around the world and we are not allowed to travel to be at home or in another particular space. Why don't we use that platform to bring all of us, whether in the UK, in South Africa, in Zimbabwe, or in other parts in the world, and have a showcase of our creativity?
It would be great to actually, I know that obviously we have to do it online at the moment, but eventually at some stage to actually gather the diaspora back.
Indeed, yeah. So we're trying to engage with the city, which have endorsed the project, which is fantastic. We got a letter from the town clerk saying it was quite something they would be willing to look at and have discussions. So I think in future we do really need to have a physical, we have everybody come in and actually hopefully do what we have seen in other cities, like here in Cape Town, how the Cape Town and Investor Cape Town Art Fair is such an integral part on the calendar of the visual arts here in the city. Everybody's just focused, they get to know the artists, they go to experience art and have that form of culture and art that they can be proud of. So that's a similar way. We thought, if nobody has been discussing, nobody was doing it, why don't we try it out? And we got such positive feedback from you guys, and I'm sure it's going to be the beginning of something that we will be proud as Zimbabwean artists and creatives.
It's quite I don't know, the word that comes to mind is sort of meta, but I think because we all deal with the idea of the diaspora in our practice as well, and then the sort of artHARARE is also dealing with the diaspora as well as Zimbabwean artists, and sort of trying to bring everyone together again. I don't know, how do you think the idea of the diaspora has affected your work or your practice?
I think obviously my early work was always inspired by the local environment. So having lived in a highly politicized environment, 2007, 2008, so response was to sort of like visually comment about what was happening in the country. So the work obviously had then a very huge focus on the political side of what was happening in the country. And then when you shift and you leave the country and you come here, where first there was the sort of like, now you know that you're practicing. You have to have, because it's such a community and much more mature art world, if I can say that. And you start navigating that and seeing other artists, how they're working very seriously, very professional. And you need to have a studio, you have to get materials from an art shop. Which in Zimbabwe, we just painted wherever we were. We had to paint outside or under a tree. We took our work seriously, but the practice side we never did. We said, I'm a practicing artist, this is my career, this is what I do, and this is a sort of like the way I work. So coming to the diaspora and you get these influences and seeing other artists also, it's kind of where you sort of professionalize, if that's a word. Professionalize your career, and then needing a studio. But what I'm trying to ask is has sort of in terms of your subject matter or your influence, is the idea of the diaspora or being in exile or being part of the diaspora, is it a part of your work and your ideas around your work? No, not exactly. There might be, in some instances, yes, on a particular work, but not exactly. My work is very narrative of obviously the environment where I am, how I respond to what is happening in this environment, or with my family, or personal, or other things that are happening in the world, and I try to interpret them visually in my work. So yeah, I would say the fact mostly was the sort of like the idea of become artist. Like I mustn't look for a job or something else. I'm committed to this. Yeah.
And the sort of situation in Zim, does that still influence your work?
It does, yeah, because I have my family there, and sometimes I go back home, and there's obviously that hope and dream that we'll get to a better position than where we are now. And yeah, it's home as well, so you can be anywhere in the world, but Zimbabwe is always home, so that I still get, yeah. Especially, obviously, also of my culture and some of the iconic icons that I use in my work or symbolism still comes from there as well. So, yeah.
What you done?
Yeah, I mean, we still have a house in Zimbabwe, so I still feel quite attached to it with my parents. So here, so I feel I'm living the diaspora in a way as well. So, are you asking how the diaspora fits in my work? Yeah, I've done a lot of stuff around it with the sort of China bags and sort of Space Invaders and stuff around migration, and I've even crossed the border illegally once with a cigarette smuggler. See, make a video.
That was quite was that recently or was that a while ago?
That was in 2009.
Okay.
Yeah, it wasn't really planned. I'd always been fascinated by the border because it was this sort of place of menace, especially when we crossed it with my family. My father was just like, let's go, don't take any photographs or whatever. But when I got some funding to do a project, and I went up to the border, and I realized from the South African side it was more accessible. And so, in spite of a lot of works, I filmed a guy moonwalking across Bight Bridge from Zimbabwe to South Africa. But we also found, on the Zimbabwean side, a guy who was like, come, I'll show you how we cross the border. I smuggled cigarettes, so took a camera. Didn't actually realize how dangerous it was. We kind of bumped into like one of these Guma guys who was like, I couldn't understand what he was saying to the cigarette smuggler guy, but luckily he left us alone. But he was a big guy, and he was, anyway, we were lucky. We crossed the border and went back again. And that was the time I went up with Gerald Machona. We did a couple of videos in Harare, and during his video he was throwing this old Zim currency off the top of this building, and the money was just landing on the road, and there was a crowd that formed. No one was picking up the money, and I had a bad feeling about that. And then when we went down, these plainclothes CID guys took Gerald, and
Was that when you were there for Haifa? Was that the Haifa time?
yes.
Yeah.
And we were taken into a ZANU-PF building, held there for a bit, and then a policeman took us to Harare Central, and then I was able to phone someone at Haifa, and we were released, but it was very nerve-wracking.
What about you?
What was the question?
I'm just trying to see like how, I guess the question is also about how do you retain connection to your influences or what your life or your feelings for Zim?
Yeah, my work is deeply informed by the events that's happening in Zim. And currently I was looking on the creative side, the coerced creative side of Zimbabwean people, how they keep going, and like how they make artworks unknowingly, but for them they think it's maybe a way of survival, like how they arrange be it shoes on their store, what makes them pick a blue pair to put it on next to a yellow pair of shoes, like that creative process. I I more like contextualize it into I don't know if it's, I don't know how, like.
I mean, I think it's like if you go to like Mbari or a market and you see the way that the guys, whatever they're making, even the way they arrange their things like in the stalls.
And sometimes the way they lure customers, they create like nice chants, like songs, short songs, like that aspect of like.
So like the guys who are selling the clothes. So
they're like, Wandera. You know, that's interesting, but to them it's a way of survival. But to me, I see it like they are making art. If we were to record those kind of things and put them out there to the world, it can be a nice song.
But music, that's just the best thing about Zimbabwe and Zimbabweans. It's like music, art, poetry. It's always just been like just a normal part of life there, I think, for so many of us.
I'm here on a study permit. I was at Rhodes for the past 2 years, and this is my final year for the visa to expire. So for the whole year, I'm here in Cape Town.
Okay.
I'll go back to Sydney.
It's also amazing how the artists in Zim like Moffat and Michele have been able to keep working and producing despite the sort of difficulties of daily life in Harare.
I think they know their ways, like their homes. They've been there for a while. They know where to get what.
They got connection.
Yeah, to me here in Cape Town, I'm just here since February.
Yeah.
Some
But I mean, if you need paint
want.
in Cape Town, you just go to the shop and buy the paint, right? So
Yes, but I'm not a painter.
Well, but whatever, like.
Yeah, in Zim also, if you want paint and canvas, you can't find any shop that sells quality paint and canvas. So, but Moffat, if he was there, he would still be in Zim. I'm sure he will find a way to bring his material there.
I think there's an aspect also of improvisation, like how Moffat uses found objects. A lot of artists, there has been that trend in trying to use materials that are around them to create work rather than relying on this conventional products like paint and canvas and you just whatever is. And I think Moffat is a
But Wallen, I mean, also
in Wallen as well,
yeah.
Yes, and that's something that is amazing about the work that is
Also
done.
assistant. Help. You know, Moffat is a lot of assistants in his
And the artist.
work making. Yeah. So probably that connection with his people. It's different when you move here. You start to look like, like this one is good at this kind of work. And now you start to scout. It might take you probably 6 months to find that same person who can do that same thing like that on your head. Yeah. So.
And Tapato also, maybe the same question.
I think basically for me, I've been inspired with my family and people around me, people I know, people I grew up around. Like, if you see some of my work, you can see there's too much ladies posing in the work. Yeah, I've been inspired. I can't say inspired. I've been touched. I met one of the lady who was selling a body in Long Street. And I knew the lady, she was a teacher back home and she was living a good life. But when things they were tough, she didn't know what to do and she don't have even papers to work here. So she's trying to get ends meet. So the only way she do is selling a body in Long Street. So
She's Zimbabwean.
yeah, Zimbabwean. Yeah, there's a lot of Zimbabwean girls there. But this lady, I know her, where she's from and where she come from. So I was so touched. So yeah, so in my work you can see like immigrants, I paint immigrants, asylum seekers, people who are looking for a better life, surviving in South Africa.
But your early work was also influenced by the transport system.
The
movement, that's how we used to also to move around.
Yeah, it was like moving, like
taxis and the trains.
for me, my trip from home, it was I get a bus in Mbare to Bedbridge, and I need to meet someone who's gonna make me move. So it was a change. So for me to I never been in Bedbridge before. I never like dream of just to go to Bedbridge. But for me it was so tough, like to meet people and see how people are struggling that side. But you can see the different South African side and Zimbabwean side. The moment you just cross to Zimbabwe, it's totally different. Yeah, it's totally different. So for me, it's so painful to see the people struggling the Zimbabwean side. Even the way we treated the border South African side also, like to see elderly people like get treated like that, and immigration officers, so touchable also. So yeah, so that's what you see in my work. That's where I get my influence, and in my stories,
And did you respond to your question?
Not yet. I think about the obviously highlighting the experiences of those Zimbabweans who are also immigrants. Because if you were not here, maybe that wouldn't have been in your work.
yeah.
Yes.
I think I'd probably take like a little piece of everyone's story. Like I think just in terms of the material that I use, I think I've also am used to being improvising and being resourceful with materials and seeing what's available, even if it's just lying on the side of the road or something. Recycling material, and then that idea of like composition, and then the idea of, and then also, I guess, the narrative of Zimbabweans being in South Africa or being in exile, and what kind of work Zimbabweans have to do in order to kind of survive here. But in a sense, we're also part of that, because as artists, we have also kind of gone through the same journey as lots of other Zimbabweans. Kind of moving, being in a foreign country and having to adjust and make things work. Yeah.
Because in some of your work also there was that the of the Mapadza, the one where was it also commenting on what was happening at home, the issue that we were agro-based. It was an agro-based economy.
Yeah.
Most families, actually, including my family, and I think everybody's here, would have some relationship with the land, and would have a little bit of a munda somewhere where they grow a little bit of.
I like also in Dan's work. I think because I don't know, for some reason Zimbabweans, I don't know if it's kind of like the idea of Zimbabwe or our lives, they have kind of informed a big part of who we are. I think we also, there was just a sort of, before the political situation, I think we all had kind of experienced the sort of magical time in Zim, where things, there was so much kind of optimism and the idea of the new African democracy in Zim, which I think everyone kind of believed in for a long time. And then to have that kind of shift and change and be destroyed, I think it's kind of, in some ways, traumatized us in many ways.
Dan, you also worked, I think, on some of your work where you use the currency.
I like to use materials that resonate for me in my work. So the money became worthless, became an obvious kind of material for me to use. I came into a lot of that after that trip to Zim. Gerald's aunt ran a spaza shop, so we ended up importing a whole black bag worth of Zim currency at the end of 2009. Those China bags, not a big material in my work. But also like matches, making like words out of matchsticks. Did a work which says patience is Zimbabwean, which is a sort of play on the fact that there's that Zimbabwean sort of patience or resilience, and also the fact that patience is a common Zimbabwean name.
I like also the is it the $20? What's it? The $20 or the $2 with the balancing rocks?
The
Sorry.
that Balancing Rocks print is actually, it's on 45 different Zimbabwean banknotes.
Okay,
It's
really.
called
What was
Dombore.
but the original, it was, I can't remember what the original.
I think it's on the original. They're called Dombore Mari, which is the money rocks, and you'll find it on the back of all the original banknotes. It's on the $2, the $5,
Oh,
the
it's
$10.
on all of them,
It's
yeah.
on there. Yeah. And there's a mother and child Balancing Rocks as well in Metopus, and
Yeah.
yeah.
When we looked at it for artHARARE and why we tried to make it, because there's so very few commercial galleries as compared to other cities. But then there's still a lot of artists that are producing exciting work. And we said, why don't we use that model where the artists themselves do the art fair and have the booths rather than waiting for us to grow a community of galleries and then have a fair. So that was kind of like the idea that
But I mean, I actually see it being like a really positive thing, because even if I think about it, it kind of takes away the pressure for galleries to be commercially successful at the fair. I think maybe with a little bit of funding and, I think artists just to have the opportunity to exhibit back in Zim, I can just imagine a kind of hall or national gallery with booths full of Zimbabwean artists. I think you ask any Zimbabwean artist anywhere in the world if they want to do that, and they'd say yes.
And I think that is the positive feedback we already got, because most of the Zimbabwean artists say they're willing to do something and participating.
So I think it's a huge positive that this is artist driven, because it kind of cuts out all that kind of bureaucracy and red tape and that kind of kind of commercial pressure as well.
Fairs can work in places like Bamako and stuff, then I'm sure they can work in Zim.
Indeed. Yeah. Because I think, kind of like some basic infrastructure is there. We have school, art school, the National Gallery BAT art school, where most of us attended. We have Gallery Delta now, which is the foundation, rather than just commercial space. The National Gallery. I think there is an opportunity there to showcase physically.
Physically is very possible, because you remember ICA.
Yes, and ICA also.
International work, it happened about 2-3 years ago. But you wouldn't believe the people who came for ICA. There were a lot. So a physical space, a physical art fair can be possible.
I think there's, always people obviously from the outside always think it's so isolated, Zimbabwe. It has been obviously, but I think there is opportunity there that is untapped. So, and I think artists, we have to find creative ways to do things rather than to say, nothing like this will happen in Zimbabwe. We always show overseas or in other countries, and I think to have an event that celebrates the local artists, whether they are living in the country or practicing.
And it's also nice because you're starting to kind of connect, like, Kumusha, and I think there are a lot of Zimbabweans even around the periphery of not necessarily visual artists, but people in the industrial sphere, and people in commerce and industry who you give them any opportunity to support something like this, and I think they'd be, very excited to do that. So,
And the trick is to start.
That's a trick.
You gotta start somewhere.
You have to start somewhere for sure.
If we start next year, then the following year, it will.
Yeah, it's gonna get bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
When people see the successful, I think a lot of artists also, they're gonna come on board, and But I think for me, it's so excitement that we are coming in the one house. Like, we never see something like this before, like Zimbabwean artist. It's my first time to meet him, and it's a great idea. It is. I think we can just say well done to someone who bring the idea, and we are so grateful also, to show it's been a long time we didn't show in one place, right?
I think that a lot of curators and collectors and institutions would actually be very interested to not have that middleman, that kind of gallery middleman in a sense, you know. I think it's quite a nice kind of point of contact, and I'm starting to realize that more and more, is that galleries have a certain place in our practice, but it's also good to establish sort of direct communication or sort of lines of communication to people.
Yeah, I think things are shifting anyway, not only in the business world or in other aspects, tourism. I think there is also some form of new reality that is going to come in the art world as well. Nobody knows what is going to happen. So I think things are always going to be in constant change, and that's something also we discussed, that you have to just tiptoe
and that leads to growth.
And that leads to growth. Yes. Exciting for things not to always remain the same.
Thanks for that.
Cheers on an empty glass. Yes. Now we can cheers.
Kumusha.